Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, there we go. Delayed reaction there. So hope you all didn't eat too much or you got some coffee or whatever. I know that the afternoon doldrums set in. But you want to stay awake for our next speaker. Oh, first of all, my name is Jeff Hickstein, president of IS Leaders. We're one of the sponsors here and sponsoring the Lead and Learn track. And it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mindy, is it Duvernet? Duvernet, excuse me. All right, I did Exceller right this morning, so I'm batting 50-50. Mindy has 13 years experience as a business analyst and extensive experience working with leadership in Fortune 500 companies and in state government. Most recently, she was a business analyst 5 at Min.IT Services at the state of Minnesota, enterprise and ideation liaison for state's innovation program. Her expertise resides in requirements management, portfolio management, strategy, web and user interface design, and cultivating and mentoring BA teams to strengthen the role within the organization. She was a 2012 IIBA Minneapolis-St. Paul chapter's president, winning the Top Chapter Worldwide Award for the organization during her term. She also has an e-commerce degree and certifications in IDLE, CPDE, Lean, and Six Sigma. Please join me in welcoming Mindy Duvernet.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. And yes, I take Duvernet and Duvernet because people do make that mistake quite often. That's not a big deal. If some of you are wondering what a CPDE is, it's a Certified Design Process Engineer. And so I've been certified in doing process engineering. This is a little bit more about me. I come from a background in design mainly, working at American Express and Ameriprise. And gradually I worked my way into the BA role, which I absolutely adore. I think that is the role that has all kinds of challenges presented to it, where documentation is key to providing success for an organization. If you don't have some requirements documented or captured in some way, some sort of diagrams and models, you can essentially lose focus of what it is you're doing for an organization. I know he said that I had 13 years of experience, but it's gone on 14 years now of working in IT, both in the public and the private sector. I've worked in 3 of the Fortune 500 companies. That would be Ameriprise, GE, and St. Jude Medical. And so you can see there, I've been in the financial, insurance, medical, and nonprofit and government. These are some of the other roles that I've had in the past. I have also participated as a project manager on certain projects, and my prime passion right now is heading up my BA Bottom Line blog. I adore sharing my knowledge. I adore getting out and doing a lot of research on information to further a cause and get the value benefits for an organization. I've been published in BA Times a number of times as well, on leadership and on the BA Big Picture. Today we'll be talking about defining the architect's role. We'll also be talking about understanding how the range of organizational needs are there to affect architecture, those projects, processes, and structures that are there to reinforce the business and architecture, and how to learn the art and science to affect the bottom line, meaning how can we align all of the things and the needs of the business to what it is we're architecting and providing as value to our customers. We also will discover how the architecture spectrum will strengthen and promote growth within an organization. Now, first, a little bit of history about enterprise architecture. Enterprise architecture goes back 20 years, and it has evolved just like any technology trend. There are always new things being presented as far as technology, software packages, ideas on how you can go about installing and producing better results for your business. But ultimately, as it continues to evolve, there are these two things that are at the crux of it. It's the system complexity, which basically you end up spending more money than you originally had planned, and poor business alignment. These are things that have been realized through the years that are still happening today. And so the bottom line is that 20 years ago, they were looking at more cost and less value. And today, they are still looking at even more cost and even less value. And as the numbers showed earlier, when Jeff Scott and Alan were talking about the discrepancy in percentage of success, that is what we're looking at still. And it's all a matter of aligning the needs with the strategy and the value benefits coming out of a particular project. Now, how many of you here have been able to work at a Fortune 500 company? Very good, about half of you. I learned so much when I worked at GE and Ameriprise and St. Jude Medical. Those organizations really knew their stuff when it came to their data dictionary. They knew their stuff when it came to the way in which they aligned to the strategic business goals. They knew how to get the information and the services and products to their customers and how to actually recognize that value with measurement. And so today we're going to be continually coming back to that particular message of how do you align your business needs to the success that you're realizing as an organization and as to all those value benefits that you're producing for your customers. Now, the definition of an enterprise architect is that it's a well-defined practice conducting enterprise analysis, design, planning, and implementation using a holistic approach at all times for the successful development and execution of strategy. Now, again, we're coming back to that strategy message. And at all organizations, there are different layers of architecture, and there are different layers in the way that you go about with your projects, different layers in the types of roles. I'm sure that this is a list right here of many of those different types of titles that people might have in organizations, but it differs across the wide expanse of organizations. And when you talk about architecture, a lot of people will think structure. They'll think about those things that are being built, like houses. But ultimately, you're talking about system architecture. And that is similar in that you have to have a framework. You have to have an understanding of the components that are going to deliver the solutions that you're looking for your business. And when it comes to putting a roof on it or topping it off with a bow, you need to understand how to produce that value for your organization. The top 4 enterprise architecture methodologies, we've already gone through some of them today, is the Zachman framework. Now, the Zachman framework is all about the who, what, when, where, why, and the how of how you can approach some of the problems you're seeing in your organization. They told me to pretty much stay in this area so that I could get picked up by the mic. But it's also a taxonomy roadmap. And that taxonomy roadmap is there because it's the status quo of what has happened before in your organization that provides the foundation for what it is your organization is trying to accomplish. If your organization is continually renewing itself in a way that it's reinventing the wheel all the time, it can become to be a little bit frustrating for you in a number of ways. And that's what we'll also be talking about, is that a lot of these organizations that are Fortune 500 are mature in the way that they're handling their optimization of all of their value benefits and how they're producing results for their customers and for their internal purposes. The Open Group Architecture Framework is one of my favorite frameworks. I was introduced to it when I started working at the state of Minnesota, and central to its core is requirements management. That's what makes it my favorite, in that it also gives you some kind of idea of the process and directions that you can allude to or look at in regard to how you make your milestones occur for your projects. The MODAF and the DODAF are also kind of derivatives of the TOGAF, and they utilize sort of an SOA approach, service-oriented architecture approach. And then there's the Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework, which basically is the framework that the federal government has put in place in order to structure their particular technology needs and ensure that they have some sort of structure to what it is they're putting in place for their infrastructure. And Gartner, of course. Gartner has their magic quadrants. They study all of the new products that are coming out, and they have a good grasp of how certain products fit within certain domains and areas of the business to provide a solid sort of way of getting at what the business needs for its organization to grow. That is one big bunch of solution resources. Oh, and I forgot to mention that these little people here that I have for my business, it's Minnie, Ginny, and Vinny. And of course, I'm Minnie. Ginny and Vinny, you'll see them in the slides coming up. But I like to be fun in the work that I do and in sharing the knowledge. And so I have this kind of caricature of cartoons going on. Here is the spectrum for you guys. At the top, of course, is the crowning glory of the spectrum with the CTO or CAO, the C-level executives. But at the bottom, you'll see that there are the project architects and application architects. What I've done here is I've taken a holistic approach to understanding and showing you how those levels of maturity rise up to the crown glory of success using the chakras. Just like in any other body or organization, you have those areas that provide stabilization and provide you with the structure that you need to understand how you're going to go about with your purpose. And like it was suggested earlier, every organization has a purpose. Every person wants to feel like they have a purpose. And if you've read Dan Pink's book, Drive, that's what he gets at when he's talking about what motivates people. It's trying to feel like they are making a difference. That's what motivates people. Not money, not success, not anything else. They just want to feel like they're making a difference. And in your organization, it's really important that you begin to reach out and with your best intentions, begin to convey the messages about how you're going to provide value to your customers and how the business and the architecture of technology will facilitate that particular goal. Now, at the root of this particular holistic diagram, you'll see here at the root, we have safety and security. You can also kind of equate this to Maslow's hierarchy. And Maslow's hierarchy has physiology at the bottom. Everybody has physical needs. Everybody has essential needs as a human. I've done other kinds of presentations as well in regard to centers of excellence that make the areas, the organs, up and down, as far as the way in which you can put a center of excellence together that will continue to perpetuate the areas of community of practice for your organization, utilizing the spine. So it's kind of interesting how we can sort of equate those areas with what it is we need to do for our organizations. But the root here, of course, we have talked about with safety and security. The project architect and applications architect need to know what the standards are in every organization when it comes to how they're going to protect the data that is coming into their applications. The next level here is the sacred level, and that level is basically where you have all your products and where you're actually, like the reproductive organ area, that is where you have products and services. And those are the things that you sell to your customers. Then there's the solar plex, the yellow area, which is more about solidarity and understanding the knowledge areas, the best practices, the things that are going to substantially be the theories of why it is you're doing what you're doing. And then the heart and the high heart are what makes you more significant than other organizations. How do you set yourself aside from other competitors? And the voice and throat area is about sustainability. What is your message? Whenever what I tell my business analysts or the folks that I lead and mentor is that whenever you have a message it's good to kind of think it through and convey what it is you're trying to influence or what it is you're trying to share in order to show a different perspective or a new solution to something. Because, I don't believe that there's, that anybody should be doing stuff differently. What I try to say is this way will basically convey a way in which you might be able to gain more value benefit for the organization. So then it's all about the intention and all about being open to new ideas and not so much about saying, well, you've been doing this wrong all along. Let me show you how to do it right. And so there's a diplomatic way in which you can go about conveying those messages, not only to your internal clients that you're trying to establish good relationships with, but also with your external customers. And so at the very top there, we have the vision and the strategy, and then the crown glory of success when you've reached the top. And so all of these areas here, as far as the different types of architects, I've equated a little bit with the different areas here. And so we'll get into that a little bit more as well. It's a very colorful slide, don't you think? I love doing analysis, and I love doing requirements elicitation. One of the key things in doing requirements elicitation is in capturing the desired goals and, the summary, the goals, the objectives, the way in which we might want to have a conceptual architecture worked out, the systems that might be involved, the system interfaces that might be involved, the database, all of those requirements that are the shell requirements of a particular need that the business has in regard to what it is you're doing, whether it's a process improvement project or whether it's a project just to implement something. At the state of Minnesota, we practiced ITIL. And there were some architects in place at the state of Minnesota. Those architects were largely in the architecture, technology architecture space. And we didn't really have any data architects. Is this thing working? Yeah. Or business architects. What we had was strictly technology architecture with a couple of with an enterprise architect, and they were pretty much siloed when it came to the executive level conversations around strategy. But they didn't participate in any of the project meetings, which was somewhat difficult for a number of us. But whenever I was in the picture, I would always invite them to the table and make sure that architecture was aware of what we were doing and how we were handling our systems connections and our integration. It's really important that you do involve them, and every architect that I've ever worked with has been appreciative of the work that we do. But if you have a disconnect there, you're not going to be able to see how the strategy is lending itself to what it is you're doing as a project, as a team, to accomplish, whether it's a new process improvement method or if it's a new platform that you're installing for IAM solution, or whether you're putting together a pricing model. You always have to have that engagement with an architect. And here, the business architecture, data architecture, and applications architecture were something that we didn't really have there. But when I was working at GE, we did. We did have it there. We had all of these different areas represented. People had their data dictionaries out. People knew what applications we were going to be utilizing and what the sort of intricacies of those applications were. The DBAs were involved so that when it came to understanding the schemas and how everything needed to come together with an ETL process or anything else, those kinds of things could be all part of the conversation. And that's important to the success of any project. And I always like to follow these particular sort of guidelines for a project, as the conversation needs to be open and participate. People need to participate and become engaged. And you don't always get that in every organization. Oftentimes you meet with a lot of barriers. But these, I think, are the domains. Is anybody here in an organization that has a different kind of title than any of the ones that I've already shared? Okay, well, the reason that I got into requirements management is that I have a joke for you, just to sort of lighten things up, because I enjoy jokes. Let me see if I can find it here. This is a joke. Our first BA, I think, in the history of the world was Moses. And that's because with the commandments, he had the statement of, thou shall. So every requirement that I create, I like the word shall. So I use this system shall provide, say for instance, a way to collect a service fee online for a license renewal, and that fee is $30. That's a pretty good requirement. But the joke is, who was the greatest who was the greatest financier in the Bible? Does anybody know? Well, Noah was floating his stock while everybody else was in liquidation. And I use that example because language is so important in an organization too. We heard Alex talk about language in detail. Every single organization has its different nomenclature for the way in which they go about talking about their systems, their products, their services, and the way in which they have their hierarchies. So it's really important to sort of get a grasp of that language right off the bat. And if you can produce, while you're doing your requirements, a glossary of terminology, of acronyms, it really helps the conversation to flow a lot easier when you have some solid way of knowing what each of those things really means in the organization, because liquidation here, stock, it means different things. The word transaction can mean different things. And all we have is our words to convey our ideas and our thoughts. And so in a thoughtful way, we need to think carefully about the words we use. This is very key. I recently was having a conversation with one of my colleagues about the failure rate, because we all know by the numbers here, we're looking at 66% strategy, a failure to align to the business. We're looking at 70% failure of requirements, but that's based off of the process management of the requirements, not the actual writing itself. But you also have to have somebody there to make sure that the requirements are concise, they are coherent, they are measurable and testable. And so that's really key to every organization too. And I can't stress enough how important it is to really capture something for what it is you're doing. Because if you only capture half of what it is you've discussed, that's better than nothing. And so I can't be a bigger advocate for good documentation or whatever. If the organization has a quality center, if they have Mercury, you know you're going to have to write something down so you can qualify your requirements backwards and forwards with your efforts. And every organization, when you think about the software design lifecycle, or the software development lifecycle, it starts with analyze. And usually there's discover before that, but analyze, design, develop, build, test, launch. And then it's cyclical again. And so when you're done with the project and you've launched it, then it can go into the service and change management area of managing that change moving forward and making it more optimized as you go, making the organization then more mature and the system more sustainable and stable as it continues to change. How many of you have been in organizations where they take a software package like a COTS package and they customize it to a level where the vendor can't support it anymore? It happens all the time. It happens all the time. Or how many of you have been in a business situation where the business buys a package without consulting IT? I mean, this has got to stop, right? I mean, there has to be these kinds of conversations where you have some idea of what it is you're doing and why based off the strategy of the organization. So that's why we're looking at this slide here. So understanding how the range of organizational needs, projects, processes, structures affect architecture. So business architecture, like Zachman said, is all about who, what, where, when, why, and how. But this particular model shows who, what, which, where, and why. And I think why is a very important question to ask, because every organization needs to know why they're spending the money to do this. Why it is that they're bringing in so many resources to accomplish this goal. It's not just to look busy, it's to get somewhere, right? So every organization doesn't have a mature model in place where they actually have business architecture, technology architecture, and information architecture all talking. But in those organizations that do have those particular roles talking to each other, they are much more mature, much more optimized, and much more beneficial to their stockholders. Here's just a comparison. I think it's important to see the difference between a project and applications architect, as well as a solutions architect and an enterprise architect. Enterprise architecture is all about the all current and future solutions of an organization, not just COTS, but also SaaS and cloud solutions. If we go back into history and we take a look at what we have achieved since 20 years ago, it's been amazing. The World Wide Web hasn't been around forever, but look at all the things that we've achieved in the range of time that has brought us to this point. There was Fortran and COBOL and the initial HTML, and then there was Java and .NET. And now we're looking at packages that are coming from vendors that are COTS solutions that can be configurable. You don't even need a developer anymore. But what you do need to capture is how those configurations suit your business model, how they suit what it is the business needs are. And the same is true for a solutions architect. I think sometimes if I were to say that there's a difference between a solutions architect and an enterprise architect, the enterprise architect is very knowledgeable about everything within the organization and beyond. The solutions architect might want to talk about ways in which they can architect something a little differently to make a difference in one way or another, or if there's a database that needs to be cleansed, or if there's a new system coming in that hasn't been integrated before. Project architects are focused right on the project. At Ameriprise, where I was project architect for the examiner package, we had, at the enterprise level, support from not only a portfolio architect, but also an enterprise entity that laid out a wonderful architect cookbook. And this cookbook was full of all of the strategies that you needed to look at as a project architect, that you needed to follow for your system, and you needed to pass the gateways of acceptance when it came to utilizing these particular standards. If you had an encryption that needed to occur for your particular solution, you needed to understand that encryption level. And if the encryption level was a primitive one that had been installed years ago and had not been kept up to date, you needed to have a way in which to have that conversation with the enterprise architecture folks saying, you know, we need a higher level of encryption for these securities certifications, and we don't have that as our standard. What do? Well, we needed to update our standard. You've read this slide perhaps, and it'll be in the deck. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but in the next comparison here, I also wanted to sort of go over the characteristics. The characteristics of a project architect are to ensure that they are responsible for their solution and to the enterprise. So there needs to be that conversation with the enterprise architecture folks. And that was what I previously alluded to. And I'm not saying that every organization has the project and application architect or a solution architect, but they certainly do have an enterprise architect. And so for those reasons, I've basically formulated this matrix so that you can see what those where those topics, how they flow across the matrix. And reporting structure is always at the bottom. Reporting should never be forgotten in a project. There's always some reason why they're doing it, whether it's a dashboard or some kind of a report. You need to know that, and you need to know how you're going to get those values to the report to show the bottom line to the executives. So, now a little levity here. One of the top pop hits of all time is "I Can't Get No Satisfaction." Well, is it any wonder we like to sort of complain about the fact that we just aren't satisfied with maybe the outcomes of some of the things that have come about, or who knows, but it's one of my favorite songs. I can dance to it really easily, and I love the Rolling Stones. But isn't it true how every time you turn around, somebody's complaining about something, or there's somebody who's unhappy about something? Well, you need to sort of turn that perspective around, because I really believe in our country that we have this sort of understanding that maybe we'll only be successful 30% of the time. But you know what? We can if we have our intentions set right, we can actually increase that so that we are successful much more of the time, and show those value benefits based on the processes that we put in place and the way in which we finally align all of those technology systems with business needs. And the way that we do that is we have an understanding of the different perspectives of the groups that we work with. Everybody comes to the table with different experiences. Everybody comes to the table with different understanding about how things need to go. Everybody has a different makeup behavioral in their behavior. And so you have to deal with all that. And it's a wonderful mixture. It's a big pot of all kinds of diversity when you really get down to it. And there's no end to what we can actually accomplish. So the hard skills are all about the smarts, the knowledge. What knowledge do you have, and what have you studied in your past? How have you been acclimated and attracted to the things that you know? Those are all very important. And then the soft skills. The soft skills are the behavioral things that we actually use in our day-to-day life. And some things moods can be triggered. Patience is one of those soft skills. Do you have a lot of patience, or are you short on patience? Do you know time management? Can you basically organize things and prepare well enough in order to be ready for what it is you need to do? And empathy. Empathy is a big one, too. In one of the performance reviews that I've gotten, in fact, several performance reviews, they always sort of recognize that I'm always putting myself in the customer's shoes. And that's kind of what you need to do in order to understand how it is you're going to provide them with value. Because if you're producing something that is just a cyclical, look, I'm being busy sort of thing, you aren't really getting any closer to optimizing your systems or providing them with more opportunities. At the state of Minnesota and MNIT services, it was all about the services that we were providing to the customers of Minnesota. In other organizations, like in GE, it's all about the products and the services. There are tangible products that they produce. There are engines and all kinds of things that are part of their value offering to the customer. Now, the art and the science is the reason I've been going off on the hard and soft skills, is that the soft skills oftentimes fall into the art, because we're talking about the art of leadership, the art of communication, the art of motivating, like we talked about Dan Pink and his book Drive, the art of enabling people, mentoring them so that you can cultivate talent, mentoring them so that they become more confident and at ease with the facilitation of what it is they need to do to make their project successful. Then there's the science, the planning, the monitoring, the control, the tracking. Those are the things that every system has in its own entity, in its own body, but at a high level, you also need to understand how all of those systems are working together capability-wise across the organization. And that's a tricky thing, because you have to think from a higher level. You can't get lost in the weeds. You just sort of have to have an instinct on how everything falls into place. Now, what I've done here is I'm sharing a couple of different models based off of the ITIL model. ITIL is all about the IT infrastructure library. And this particular graphic shows the service strategy, the service design, transition, operations, and then the last little area over here is all about, the orange area is all about process improvement. It's continual service improvement, and that centers around those things that are measurable, those things that end up being reports, and those things where you're talking about process improvement to save time and money. This is just a different way of showing the same graph. So you can get creative, you can do all kinds of things in drawing the models that you need to do in order to conceptually understand how all of these areas that are part of your organization lead to standing up what the value is for the customers of that company. In the center here, we've got the service catalog. And the service catalog is extremely important when it comes to if you're a company that just does services. And as you can well imagine, it can be many services or one-to-many services, but that's something that any company would have to get a grasp at, and you would see the different departments that support that service. And then there's the configuration aspect of handling those services and how the systems are providing the functionality needed to promote those services. Then there's those dreaded statistics. How many of you have seen that 70% of software projects fail because of poorly managed requirements? Well, that is a very disheartening sort of statement to see, and that has been the statement for the number of years here. I think that by last count, we have increased the amount of success just minimally, but that 70% seems to come up a lot. And really, the requirements effort is the ultimate reason why we can't get no project satisfaction? I don't think so. I think it has to do with the poor management of requirements management. So when you are working with your managers, your supervisors, are they in your meetings? Have you invited them to your meetings, or have they said, oh, you just take care of it? Because if that happens, then they have no idea of what kinds of decisions might be made or what kinds of decisions need to be made by management. As a BA, I can only influence. I can't make decisions. So if that manager were in the room actually hearing the discussion around what kinds of things we were dealing with, he wouldn't have to ask me to reiterate it again and again. You can always kind of come to the table, show him a drawing that shows how you have this dilemma, and then the three options that might be a part of the decision-making process, what provides more value, what kind of risks are involved. But really, we need to engage those managers more and get them to make the decisions on the spot, because time is money. Here I just had a little bit of fun. What does your organization really look like? The one here is a nah. You don't want to really build your organization on a community of practice. Community of practice, like if you're following the BABOK, which is the business analyst body of knowledge, or if you're following the PMBOK or the BizBOK, those are a lot of good theories and a lot of good frameworks to get you going. But really, you want to be able to have some really good, stable standards that are historical to the organization. And that's why I've got this particular diagram over here. This is a ta-da, because ultimately for an organization like FedEx or UPS that deals with sensors and geospatial data, you're going to have to know your information management from the top down. You're going to have to know your network operations from the top down, and all of these different areas of applications management, service management, standards management. All of these things need to be supported in a way that makes sense to your organization. And having standards at the bottom there makes a lot of sense. Putting standards in place at an enterprise architecture level and putting them out there available to the people who need to know are going to help you save a lot of time. They're also going to have to be updated as new technology comes down the pike, because every time we turn around, there's some new technology. And now we're dealing with mobile technology, mobile accessibility. What does that all look like? So if we have some idea of how to capture all of that information and put the standards in a document, archive it, then you have some place to start. But if you don't have that, then you're starting over and over and over again. So let's just kind of take a look here at the methodologies again. I think that you're all aware of what these all look like, but the Zachman has also been a big help in the architecture realm. As you know, BAs can aspire to be architects. In the BA competency model, how many of you might have had the beginning as an analyst? There we go. So it can happen, and I'm going for that as well, but I love the BA role so much that I just love to be an advocate and spread knowledge and understanding of how all of these things work. And given the right opportunity, I would welcome an architecture role, because there is a lot of work to be done there. But the Zachman framework has a wonderful way of putting together not only the who, what, when, where, why, and how, but also their business model, the system model, the technology model, etc. And then when we get to the FE, the Federal Enterprise Architecture Framework, this has been around a long time too. So there's a lot of discussion that can happen there. If you just bring people together in a room who want to put together some kind of model to show what it is your business, is that the 5-minute mark or 10-minute? Okay. Sorry. You will basically have a wonderful conversation, and it can be time well spent. So, and the TOGAF, of course, is my favorite because, as I said earlier, the requirements management is key to every one of those particular areas that are part of its model. Now, the competencies and capabilities, as I said earlier, you need to be able to manage these. These can be rather nebulous if you don't get your mind wrapped around them in some way. But when you begin to talk about them with your groups and you begin to talk about the spectrum of architecture and how much there is, maybe you discover that you need a solution architect in the mix. Or maybe you can convince your enterprise architect that really what you need to have is a couple of project architects on the project. It's all a matter of having those discussions and seeing how it might fit into their model. Because, as you know, the status quo is pretty powerful, but there's no harm in bumping up against that status quo and offering new suggestions and ideas for it. But ultimately, when you do that, you really need to know where they're coming from and what they have tried to set up as a legacy for their organization. Here, I just basically kind of had some fun. So when you go and have these conversations in your organization, you want to consider the art and science of everyone who comes to the table, their skills, their background. And that's why earlier when Alex or one of the other speakers mentioned, get some kind of feel for what these people are all about personally, because it's really important to establish those relationships and understand how they're going to lend themselves to the success of the project. You can't really foresee that, but you can get a sense of the good intentions that are there and how progressive and how eager these people are to satisfy and produce something that's going to be successful for the organization. From the bottom up, I have change management and requirements management. For every system that's already been implemented, there should be some process in place to handle change. Like I had mentioned earlier, how many of you had implemented a software package and then customized it to a point where the vendor wouldn't support it anymore? This is what we're talking about here. You want to have those conversations so that doesn't happen. If you need to customize something, make a whole new component that can be part of that reuse and save or the service-oriented architecture solution that will prove to be something that would be a component of a number of systems, not just making customization into a package that you can't upgrade anymore. So taking it from the bottom up, you just would take it all the way from your change management level into your planning and implementation and governance, and consider all those layers. Because as Alan alluded to earlier, you've got that T, the breadth and the depth of what it is you need to do. And every project is different, and every team is different. So that's my suggestion for moving forward with the spectrum of the BA architecture. So how to discover? or discover how the architecture spectrum can strengthen and provide resilience in the ever-changing world of technology and promote growth. Well, you want to strengthen the organization by understanding their capabilities. If there's a gap in the capabilities, you want to be able to recognize that so you can talk about it and bring it to your chiefs and say, you know, I understand that we're doing it this way, but I think we're missing this portion here. We need to understand the root cause of why this is not being tended to. What can we do to achieve the alignment with the business in this particular area? And I'm sure some of you have talked about domain-driven design, service-oriented architecture, but understanding how the alignment of business capabilities and competencies actually connect with all of your systems and your products and services to your clients, and the value benefit of those products and services will aid in the overall success of not only your career, but also the growth of your organization. And as a business architecture effort matures, as it goes from an ad hoc level where you basically are doing things over and over and over again, repetitively, just to do the work or to have some means of connecting all these dots, what you need to do is repeat those processes so you have them happening all the time, where you become more and more optimized until you hit the crowning glory of when you have an upgrade, you know that this is going to be an upgrade to provide these new features. And why are those new features important to your organization and to your customers? You have it captured somewhere in your requirements. You can show the measurables. You can actually test it to ensure that it's meeting the results that the business had expected, or that the strategy experts had expected. Because, as you know, a lot of projects start with a business case. The business case leads into a project charter, or it can lead into the requirements effort. Every organization is different, but no money is put towards any project that doesn't have some means of providing the bottom line of value benefits to its customers. You might have some managers who have pet projects that nobody knows about. Those need to be weeded out because they don't lead to a strategy. Or if they do, you need to uncover how they lead to a strategy. But ultimately, every organization goes through these transformations. It's all about how you manage those transformations. And then we can become satisfied. We can become satisfied with the results. We can be happy with the way in which we've achieved those results. We've done it diplomatically. We've done it with zest and zeal to make sure that we have achieved a growth pattern for our organization moving forward, and our customers are happier than they were before. So ultimately, all aspects of system changes and requirements management are at the core of these activities. And the number one top pop hit of all time was Imagine. So if you were to sing a song, actually manifest your success by singing a song that is representative of that. I just like the song Imagine. And so that is the end of my presentation. Here are some references that I use it in doing my presentation. And we have a few minutes for questions.
I was just curious on the spectrum of architecture model. Did you pull that from some industrial models? Is that something that you've created after observation over a period of time?
That's the latter. Yes, it's my own creation, and the chakras was my own creation as well. Thinking of the spectrum of light, as you would in any body or entity, those things are important and core. So I just wanted to kind of manifest a way in which I could share that because I think it is applicable.
On one of your early slides, you had, I believe, and I think it was on the rainbow and chakra slide, excuse me, you had solution architecture above technology architecture above information and data architecture. Then near the end, you had another hierarchy that had information architecture, business architecture above information data architecture above technology and solution architecture. But you're also talking about them as a spectrum. Are they parallel? Are they peers? Are they hierarchical?
You just need to consider each one of those architecture layers, and whether you draw them from the bottom up with the business architecture being a foundation or enterprise architecture being a foundation. It's totally up to you. But I just wanted to sort of correlate when it came to that slide. I think that I can back up here. That as you progress up the ladder, so to speak, of your organization with more and more knowledge and skills, attaining that enterprise architecture role, you may start out as a project architect, but depending on which organization you're in, the more skills and the more expertise you learn on the way up actually make you more important to your organization and more a bigger resource for them when it comes to why they're doing what they're doing and how all these connections need to occur. That's all I wanted to show there. So at the top with technology architecture, that is prior to hitting the crowning glory of success for your organization. Because like I said earlier, every organization has an enterprise architect. They don't always have all the rest from the bottom up. But these layers are important to an organization. And when I worked at GE and when I worked at Ameriprise and St. Jude Medical, three of the 5 Fortune 500 companies, they also had different layers of architecture instead of just an enterprise architect or a project architect.
So when you say layers, are they hierarchical?
Yep. Hierarchicals. So as a project architect at Ameriprise, I needed to talk to the portfolio architect and then the enterprise architecture group in order to get my system set up properly. So those should all be supporting you if you are a junior architect.
All right, I'm told we've got to move it along for the next presenter.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mindy.